The first ray of sunlight pierced through the ruins of the library, illuminating the dust particles suspended in the air. The ground was still covered in ashes and torn books, but at the center of it all, the book remained untouched, as if the fire and destruction had deliberately ignored it. Azael had not touched it, but Ethan had. The archaeologist still held it in his hands, feeling the weight of something more than just ancient pages. A weight that seemed to anchor itself to his spirit, as if an invisible shadow had latched onto his essence the moment his fingers brushed against the cover. Azael looked at him with the tense expression of someone who already knew the end of a story before it began. "Leave it." Ethan looked up. "What is this book, Azael?" The angel did not respond immediately. Outside, the sky began to change color, taking on a golden hue that did not bring peace, but a warning. Finally, Azael lifted his gaze. The Last Pact. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "What does it mean?" Azael exhaled heavily. "It means we can no longer stop what's coming." Then, he vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving Ethan alone with the book and a sunrise that heralded the beginning of something inevitable. The night wind was thick, carrying a metallic scent that did not belong to this world. Ethan walked through nearly deserted streets, still clutching the book tightly against his chest. His footsteps echoed on the damp pavement, and though he tried to convince himself that he was alone, he knew he wasn't. Every time he blinked, fleeting shadows slid at the edges of his vision. Something was following him. He stopped at an intersection and looked around. The flickering neon lights of an old bar blinked in the distance, and beyond them, the city lights seemed dimmer, as if the night was swallowing them. He took a deep breath. He had to understand what was happening. With a resolve that barely felt like his own, he opened the book. The pages, though ancient, did not crumble at his touch. The text was written in a language he had never studied, yet somehow the words slipped into his mind with perfect clarity. The soul is not man's possession. It is an offering that can only be given if the will allows it. But he who seals the pact in blood shall open the gates of the abyss and release the fallen. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. A sound interrupted his reading, a whisper. He snapped the book shut and turned around. There, in the dimness of an alley, two eyes were watching him. "You've opened it. Now they can see you." The voice was deep, ancient. It was not human. Ethan took a step back. The figure in the shadows moved forward, and when the light touched its face, he knew his life would never be the same again. The city breathed in shadows, wrapped in a stillness that didn't belong to it. Ethan walked through the empty streets, the book held firmly under his arm. His mind burned with questions that could not be answered by the mere passage of time. What was the Last Pact really? Why did Azael fear it so much? A cold wind swept down the avenue, and a chill ran down his spine. He felt a presence before he saw it. "You've unearthed something you shouldn't have." Ethan stopped abruptly. In front of him, in the middle of nowhere, a tall man in a dark robe stood watching him with unsettling serenity. His face was impassive, as if time itself was reflected in it, and his eyes were not human. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, unable to tear his gaze away. The man tilted his head slightly. "Raziel." Ethan felt his blood freeze in his veins. He had read that name before. The Angel of Knowledge, the guardian of forbidden secrets. That book should never have reached your hands. Ethan took a step back, but Raziel didn't move. "I didn't come to take what you possess. I came to warn you." The wind blew fiercely. Ethan felt the city fading around him, as if only he and this being remained on the threshold of another reality. Warn me of what? Raziel looked at him with an unfathomable depth. The Last Pact is not just a book, it's a seal. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. A seal of what? The angel didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was an echo of something ancient, something feared. A pact sealed with blood, capable of freeing those who were chained. Ethan swallowed hard. The fallen angels. Raziel nodded. But it's not just that. His voice grew graver. That pact can only be fulfilled by will. Ethan felt something twist inside him, like a hidden truth inside him was beginning to surface. Why me? Raziel watched him in silence for a long moment before answering. Because the pact doesn't only seek to free the fallen, it also seeks its king. Ethan's heart stopped for a second, but Raziel had already vanished. Ethan didn't return to the library. He knew he was being watched. He knew he was watching him. He wandered aimlessly until he reached a dark alley where the city's lights barely managed to seep through. Leaning against the wall, he tried to organize his thoughts. Raziel, the Last Pact, the king of the fallen. The book felt heavier than it should, not physically, but as if something inside it was awakening. You know what you must do. Ethan turned sharply. Azael was there, emerging from the shadows as if he had always been a part of them. His wings remained hidden, but his presence was imposing, even in the gloom. Tell me you haven't considered reading it again. Ethan pressed his lips together. What if the answer is inside? Azael stepped closer until only a few paces separated them. You don't understand what you're holding. Ethan held his gaze. What if I do? The angel sighed. If you continue down this path, there will only be one possible ending. Which one? Azael took a moment to respond. His voice grew deeper. You will lose the one thing you can never get back. A chill ran through Ethan. My soul. Azael nodded. Ethan looked at the book. Its cover seemed alive, pulsating, waiting. Then we have to destroy it. The angel was silent for a moment. Then his gaze hardened. I agree. But before he could say anything else, a gust of wind rattled the alley. A shadow slipped between them. Ethan felt a cold whisper in his ear. That will never happen. And in the blink of an eye, the darkness swallowed them whole. The world returned in an instant. Ethan and Azael appeared in a place he didn't recognize. It wasn't the city, nor the library. It was an impossible space, a vast hall of dark stone, illuminated only by bluish torches that cast no heat. The walls were covered with ancient inscriptions, words that seemed to move if you stared at them too long. Ethan staggered, gripping the book tightly. Where are we? Azael scanned the place with his sharp gaze. In a domain that does not belong to us. An echo of footsteps broke the silence. From the shadows emerged a tall, slender figure wrapped in a dark robe. His face, partially covered, displayed a serene, almost kind smile. But his eyes were a bottomless abyss. Ethan Moreau. His voice sounded like a whisper multiplied in 1,000 directions at once. You're exactly where you need to be. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Who are you? The figure tilted his head. Someone who appreciates knowledge. Ethan knew it before Azael confirmed it with his grave voice. Raziel. The angel of knowledge smiled. I didn't come to fight, Azael. I came to talk. Azael did not lower his guard. There's nothing to discuss. Raziel ignored his response and turned to Ethan. Do you know what the Last Pact really is? Ethan swallowed. A soul exchange. Not just that. Raziel moved forward calmly. It's a right, a choice. Humans have always sold their souls for power, wealth, revenge, but it was never theirs to give. Ethan frowned. Then what is it? Raziel extended his hand toward the book, but without touching it. The Last Pact is the only way a human can transcend their mortality without God's will. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. And why would anyone want to do that? Raziel smiled, leaning slightly toward him. Because absolute power does not need to ask for permission. Azael took a step forward. You won't listen to him. But Ethan felt doubt begin to creep into his mind. Raziel tilted his head. You can destroy the book and remain a mere mortal, or you can open it and see what's really inside. Ethan looked at the book in his hands. His heart was pounding. Azael looked at him with desperation. Ethan, no. Ethan lifted his gaze, and for the first time he wasn't sure which decision to make, and in that moment, temptation became real. Ethan held the open book in front of him. His breath was uneven, his mind caught between disbelief and fascination. The words on the first pages were a direct blow to his soul. Jesus shed his blood for everyone, except for you. He felt a shiver run down his spine, but turned the page with trembling hands. Jesus died for everyone, except for you. Ethan swallowed. Each phrase was a weight, sinking deeper into his chest. He turned another page. This time, what he found wasn't condemnation, but promise. All your desires will be fulfilled. Images formed in his mind, limitless wealth, forbidden knowledge, power beyond any comprehension. He could see it, feel it, almost touch it. His future was written in those pages, but the price still remained to be paid. He kept reading. On the last page, a single paragraph glowed in dark ink. To claim what is yours, pay the price. A simple pact, a signature. And beneath it, the final words, written with an irregular stroke, as if they had been carved into the skin of the universe itself. The price is your soul. Below the inscription, a blank line awaited him, and beside it, the final instruction. Sign with the blood of your left thumb. Ethan felt his body tense. Behind him, Azael watched with a furrowed brow, ready to intervene. But before he could move, Raziel whispered from the shadows, "The choice is yours alone, Ethan. No one can take it from you." Ethan lifted his gaze. The room seemed darker, as if the whole world was waiting for his response. His left thumb trembled over the page. Azael took a step forward, desperation in his voice. "Don't do it." Ethan closed his eyes, and the story was far from over.